Invisible on ABC 7 News, brought to you by Street Auto Group. Our community matters.
The U.S. has crossed a critical threshold during this pandemic. The CARES Act has come to an end, and landlords can resume the eviction process, putting roughly 20 million renters at risk of eviction by October. In this week's Invisible, we break down the potential for these developments to add to the tally of homelessness in our area.
The human, the empathetic part of me is like, hey, where do these people go?
A question on many minds in the coming months as evictions begin. Many renters taking part in federal housing assistance programs or landlords who had a federally backed mortgage were protected by the CARES Act, which mandated a 120-day federal eviction moratorium. But time's up.
They could actually start filing those cases July 23rd. Those cases couldn't be heard till after August 24th.
Starting this week, justices of the peace can begin hearing eviction trials because of late, or in some cases, no rent payments. Precinct 4 Judge Thomas L. Jones usually hears 60 to 80 cases a month. Most of that precinct is rental property.
There's a certain part of Potter County that's impoverished, which is the northern quarter of the county. So anytime you have a high impoverished population, then you're going to have those issues. And so those numbers are definitely going to go up.
And that part of the job, Judge Jones says, is the hardest.
You can see the emotion. I mean, anybody who's on the verge of homelessness, that's emotional. I mean, especially having children. There's a degree of emotions. Sometimes those emotions spill over to anger and frustration with the system and figuring out where do I get a break within this system.
And that system also means a business that's facing its own struggles thanks to the pandemic.
People think landlords have a lot of money. They don't. Most of them have loans on their properties. It may not be federal loans, but it's still a loan where they've got to pay the payment.
Paul French manages a couple hundred properties around the Texas Panhandle. He says several landlords have worked with renters.
And so then we tell the tenant, okay, the landlord says on this particular property to work with you. You tell us what you can do and when you can do it.
But that situation becomes an honor system, or else the eviction happens, placing families on the street, something that Judge Jones sees within his precinct, belongings being put curbside.
You can definitely see that there's an atmosphere now that's conducive to homelessness. You can see that.
Parents and children with no place to go, sometimes even placed temporarily in hotels. And while an eviction may make it harder to qualify for new rentals, there's a looming problem: not enough houses.
The hardest thing for tenants right now is to find something that fits their needs.
And the biggest monkey wrench? The tumultuous school year.
Our low-income population is, you find that some of our students, more than likely, those 2 meals would more than likely be the only 2 meals that they receive. Then you have a number of resources, those who have medications, those who have other resources, counseling, other assessments. So will they have access to those assessments?
Now, President Trump signed an executive order earlier this month to extend the moratorium on evictions, but one local lawyer says he doesn't have that power, and it's not something renters should rely on, as it asks the CDC and the Department of Health and Human Services to consider whether halting evictions is reasonable or necessary to stop the spread of COVID-19, leading to local justices of the peace facing the emotional aftermath.
That's what our legislators that's what they should be doing. And that's the issue that our legislators should have addressed. I don't want to get into the political aspect of it, but sometimes those political aspects spill over into every normal day-to-day life.
Now, Judge Jones says we won't know the impact of the lack of CARES Act protections for a couple months, but he adds there's a potential to increase the population of the invisible.
Now, another landlord we spoke with mentioned the importance of communication between tenants and landlords to work things out during this tough economic time. And for those struggling, there are other avenues for assistance through the city of Amarillo, which can be found at comdev.amarillo.gov or with a quick Google search of Amarillo Rental Assistance.